You're watching Cape Elizabeth Television, CETV. This is CETV, Cape Elizabeth Television.
Good evening. Welcome to the May Cape Elizabeth School Board meeting. The first item on the agenda tonight is adjustments to the agenda. Is there anybody on the board that has anything that they want added to the agenda? Anybody from the public?
Yes, a parent group would like to at some time read a short letter to the school board
Okay. Concerning,
concerning the fourth grade class for next year and class size.
okay. Why don't we put that under A, transition team under superintendent's report. At the end of that particular item, we will listen to what Dr. Goldman has to say and then invite parents. And please come up to the podium and identify yourself and state your letter. Any other adjustments from the audience? Yes. Oh, sure. Sorry. Any other adjustments from the audience? Okay. The second item is approval of school board minutes, the meeting of April 14th, 1992. Are there any additions or corrections?
I do have a comment. Under 2, this is my second month on this issue, I thought that we corrected the minutes of the meeting concerned, and then they were just placed in the file rather than having the correction reflected in the next month's meetings. In other words, I thought you went back to the minutes of the meeting in which a correction was noted and just corrected those minutes, rather than...
That also.
You do that also. I would suggest you do that all the time, because anybody, not that it's this, earth-shaking, but it's much harder to read the minutes if you have to keep looking for subsequent corrections.
We do correct them. The ones we keep permanently are corrected in our books.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
So the ones that you keep permanently would not show point 2?
Would not show what?
Or would they show the fact that there was a correction pointed out in the subsequent meeting?
It would show both.
Okay.
It would show in these minutes, it would show in April, in the March minutes, as corrected, as you corrected.
Okay, if that's the tradition, it seems like a lot, but if everybody's happy with that, that's fine.
I have one. On page 75A, the second page, under 5, communications, the last paragraph. The committee is an arts committee, not an integrated arts committee. Art, just plain arts, not integrated arts. And it was also to evaluate the K-5 arts curriculum, not establish.
Any others? Okay, thank you. The minutes stand approved. The next item, comments by first the middle school representatives.
Hello. First of all, next week is going to be the middle school's Spirit Week, in which each of the 5 days is assigned a different topic, and the kids come in and dress up as that day. And there are prizes given out every day. They're like contests. As far as band and chorus concerts are concerned, this is promising to be a fairly eventful month. There will be the 7th and 8th grade band chorus, garage band, and chamber group concert on May 27th. The 6th, 7th, and 8th grade bands will be playing at the Memorial Day celebration on May 25th. And we will have our last dance, the 7th and 8th grade last dance, on June 5th. And that's supposed to be pretty casual. We also have some orientations for next year. The 7th and 8th grade orientations will be on June 2nd and June 1st, the 7th on June 2nd and the 8th on June 1st. And our spring sports have gotten well underway and the games have started. And thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. There will be an orientation for the incoming grades 5th grade on June 10th and the incoming grade 6th grade on June 8th. There will be a choral concert for the 4th through 6th grades, and there will be a band concert for the 5th through 6th grade on June 3rd. The 6th grade all had a great experience at Chewonki, and we all felt it was very worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments by high school representatives.
As I'm sure you know, the issue of the proposed schedule change for the high school next year is being widely debated, especially by students. Those students who are in favor of the schedule change are definitely in the minority. For the most part, students in favor of the schedule change are just willing to try to see what happens and think that it may work. However, the most vocal students are those who are standing out in opposition to this schedule for several different reasons. One reason in particular is that students just feel that 80 minutes is a long time. Oftentimes sitting in a 42-minute class, the class just seems to drag on, and particularly in certain subject areas, students are having a hard time sitting through 80 minutes of that subject. Also, we've been reassured that the teachers will adjust their teaching style so that they will not simply be talking at us for 80 minutes. But for the most part, the students who are against this just simply do not believe that all teachers will do this. While the teachers have said that they will attempt to change their teaching styles, students generally agree that in some particular classes, they will have to listen to lectures for 80 minutes, which everyone agrees is almost an almost impossible thing to do. Students are also concerned by the fact that we didn't really know about this until suddenly the faculty brought this up and voted on it, and we were told in our classes that this would be the schedule next year. And students are disturbed by the fact that the administration doesn't seem to be willing to have a trial period in which we could just simply see if we can stand sitting through 80-minute periods and see if it in fact will work. So for the most part, students are rather upset about this proposed schedule change and not in favor of it.
I have a question. I know it's difficult to do, but is there any insight that you can give us in terms of how you determine majority versus minority or a percentage? Or
Well, basically just hearing kids talking at in the hall. A lot of teachers have brought up the issue of the schedule in different classes, and mostly kids are saying, I don't like this, it's not a good idea, how am I going to sit through 80 minutes of whatever class? So also the SAC has talked about it, and the general sentiment there was that it wasn't a good idea. So there only seemed to be a few people saying that it sounds like a good idea.
Okay, last week the SAC hosted Scarborough High School and at our school, and this was continuing our school exchange program that was geared mainly towards breaking the rivalry between our two schools. And it's proven such a success that we're planning a final barbecue at Fort Williams on June 1st for the two schools. It went amazingly well. Also, for the past several months, the high school students have been working on the production of My Fair Lady, the musical. Performances have been scheduled for May 27th, 28th, and 29th, and the drama department is very eager for the community attendance. It's supposed to be a very wonderful show. And finally, on behalf of the class of 1993, we would cordially like to invite the school board members to our prom on May 21st at the Sonesta Hotel at 8:30. This year's theme is Dreamweaver. A lot of work has gone into it this year, and we're very optimistic that it's going to be a success. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes?
Lauren, may I just ask, did the SAC take a test? I'm sorry.
Did the SAC take a vote regarding the 80-minute periods, or was it just a discussion item?
I know there was a discussion. Courtney, I think I missed that meeting.
Yeah. There was a discussion where administration came to talk to us, and what was your question?
Did the SAC take a vote?
Not an official vote. No, it was just mainly open discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is communications. Dr. Golden.
Just opening.
Yeah, we want to look at our invitations. Yes, thank you.
See who does your cards. It's very nice. Is this on? No. Now it is. Communications. I have a couple that I'd like to share with you. One is a communication, actually it was to me from Nancy St. John, quoting or giving me a copy of another communication. The Unum Charitable Foundation grant has a practice of giving out small grants to classrooms where one of their employees is a volunteer. And one of the grants that was recently distributed was a $250 grant in the name of Barbara McCusick-Liscord, who is a Unum employee volunteering in Carolyn Sloan's classroom. So we would certainly like to congratulate all involved, and I know from having talked to Mrs. Sloan that there is lots of ideas as to how they will spread that around, and we certainly thank Unum. And I also have another communication. Jenny Higgins, a junior at our high school, Cape High School, has been named a Gold Award winner in the Arts and Humanities category in a national contest called the Discoverer Card Tribute Award Program. Jenny is a gold medal winner at the state level here and will go on to compete at the national level. The Tribute Award carries with it a $2,500 scholarship at the state level, and will be competing in the national level for a $20,000 gold, $15,000 silver, and $10,000 bronze scholarship. The program recognizes students who demonstrate accomplishments in 4 of the 5 following areas: leadership, obstacles overcome, unique endeavors, special talents, and community service, and also maintaining a minimum 2.75 grade point average. We're certainly very proud of you, Jenny. I know I already have spoken to you, and wish you the best of luck in the national competition.
Yes, congratulations. That's wonderful. Next is the superintendent's report. The first item is transition team.
Thank you. This has been an interesting year in trying to sort out a number of interrelated issues, and I personally have spent, I don't know, hundreds of hours in it, I guess, and I know that staff members and certainly school board members and to some degree parents from the community have also spent a lot of time. The transition team itself was set up to try to help us make a smooth transition, or at least as smooth as possible, in rearranging the way we're using our buildings next year. Just to refresh people's memories, we issued through the School Space Study Committee in October a report that looked at all of our buildings, but particularly concentrated on the, frankly, dilapidated condition, and that term was used repeatedly, of the current middle school and Pond Cove schools. We also had to study a space problem. That is, by next year's 8th grade, we will have more youngsters K-8 than we can fit into the available space, even taking into consideration the temporary buildings that have been put in place in the last few years. When we looked at the options and discussed them at some length beginning about a year ago, we realized we were going to have to look at a number of interrelated issues. One of them was the fact that the high school has extra space given the current enrollment, and it had repeatedly surfaced in community discussions that we were going to have to make better use of that space before we could really proceed with both community and state applications for help in a major building and renovation effort. After a number of steps, including some public hearings and certainly discussion at the board level and discussions in the buildings, the board voted in January to move the kindergarten to the high school. We proceeded with steps doing that, and at the same time we also realized that that was going to move the 4th grade from the current middle school building back into Pond Cove. One of the things that the transition committee was supposed to do was to look at what are the nuts and bolts issues of that move, and to look at precisely what rooms would be used, how we would furnish them, how we would build a budget to take care of the variety of things we were going to run into. I simply do not intend to summarize all of that. If there's anybody listening for whom this is a new issue or who would like more data, believe me, we have it. And I'd be happy to share it with you, but I don't want to take all that time tonight. I just want to make note that the committee has met now 4 times. It has put in a lot of time in addition to the actual meetings. I believe this afternoon's meeting, for instance, we all left saying we've really accomplished a lot. There are some other issues we will be tying up, but we have looked at plans for the renovation and okayed them for the renovation of the rooms that will be used at the high school. We have listened repeatedly to concerns from the 4th grade as well as other grade use, including specialists at Pond Cove. We haven't found perfect solutions. What we have tried to do is to understand and identify the problems that we are looking at and try to put this in context to see that this is part of a larger picture. We have got to move ahead with our building renovation programs, and we certainly appreciate the cooperation of everybody involved. One of the issues that surfaced along the way was, could we put all the 4th grades into Pond Cove? And that was a board agenda item last month. It determined one of the things that really came out of that discussion was, is it better to put next year's 4th grade in 6 or 7 divisions? In the budget, in the course of the budget discussion, we looked at both possibilities. However, there simply aren't enough rooms to put everything that belongs to Pond Cove in the existing building. So some facilities would, or some services would have to remain over at the middle school. There have been a lot of internal discussions about this, and it has certainly came to my attention after the board meeting last month that not all of those internal discussions were well understood by the parent community. So we offered to meet with parents and in fact spent some time this morning, and I see some of the parents here, and I understand that you wish to discuss the issue when I finish summarizing. Be happy to hear from you. I do want to point out that we do have policies on class size, which we shared with parents, and the decisions that we are making are within those policy guidelines. But regardless of what a policy may be, we do appreciate that each of you has the primary interest of your own children at heart, and we appreciate your listening to our need to look at a lot of interrelated issues. We do feel that we have examined as carefully as we can and made the best judgments, the best decisions that we can. We are willing to consider and have discussed with both teachers and parents the whole issue of a contingency plan. That is, what happens when a significant number of children move in at any grade level, not just this fourth grade level coming up, but what about suppose we had 15 first graders move in? What would we do? Because we have no extra space, and because budget times are tight, and because there are limited ways in which we can solve these problems, it is, I think, healthy for us to have these discussions at this period of time. And we have thought about various ways in which we could plan so that we could have an extra division if we needed it, or at least what process we would use to determine that. These are just some of the issues that the transition team has looked at. I know that there are some comments that parents want to make about the fourth grade situation. So unless somebody has any questions of me, I'll summarize it that way and listen.
Thank you. Okay, would you like to?
I'm Kathy Price, and I have a third grader at Pond Cove and also a sixth grader at the middle school. My family and I are new to Cape Elizabeth. We came here September 1st. We came here for one reason, since we had absolutely no knowledge of Southern Maine at all, and that was because we'd been told about the excellence of the school system here. And I have to say that after this first year, it does not disappoint. And I'm speaking from a slightly different perspective, perhaps, than some of the parents here, because we came from a suburban Washington, D.C. school system, which, even though you may think it's recession-proof, county budgets are not. The school system has suffered terribly, and one of the casualties of the school system has been class size, which has gone up by a factor of perhaps 20%. This is a school system that Cape Elizabeth will probably never have to experience because of the economic climate that we have here. But we have 11-year-old girls becoming pregnant. We have 14-year-olds murdering 11-year-olds over the price of a jacket. It's a very difficult concept if you've not lived in that situation to understand the absolute beautiful system that is here. Having said all that, which you can read in your daily papers, first of all, I think that you as a school board are extremely representative of the parent community. And so no one here would for a moment think that you had anything but the children's best interests at heart, as we do. Our general concern, and again I speak as a new parent not having been involved in the system before, any time the issue of teacher-pupil ratio comes up, it sends up a little warning flag, even for those of us who know better, who know that our children are not going to start carrying guns and switchblades because the class size goes from 22 to 23 to 24. But it is a little danger signal because it is the very underpinning of the excellence of this school system that the children get the individual attention that they do. The fourth grade happens to be caught in the squeeze this year, not because anybody's picking on the fourth grade, but because building and physical plant necessity has caught them there. And it's unfortunate that they not only face the possibility of perhaps being a bit overcrowded in each classroom, but that they're going to have one less year, if you will, to prepare for middle school because of the new system. The emotional needs of this particular age group, we were told by our son's teacher at our teacher conference, that the teachers are finding more and more that this particular age, the 9-year-olds, the 10-year-olds, are beginning to feel the societal pressures, the loss of self-esteem, the questioning of self, the awareness of what's going on in the community. And she said that teachers are finding generally the anxiety level and the frustration level is a little bit higher in this age group than they had seen previously, that it's beginning to come at this age as opposed to the middle school. That's really the only thing that I would like to bring up, is that when decisions are made about class size, that perhaps we might want to consider that, first of all, the 4th grade will be facing a slightly different situation this year than in the past in terms of their future, and also that each age has its own special needs, and we all know that. We have children in different grades as well. But this particular age group, if something can be done to keep individual attention as high as it can be, I think that you will find it will bear itself out as the children approach the middle school years. They might have perhaps a more solid foundation. And let me just conclude by saying that as a new resident of Cape Elizabeth, I am very thankful for this school system, and I'm very glad that we came here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment? Okay. Comment from the board?
Oh, I think we have.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, my name is Marty Clark. I have a 3rd grader, and I also have a 7th grader, excuse me. I'd like to talk about the meeting that we had today. We parents went to that meeting. We have a petition with 35 signatures, and I also have 6 copies of that petition, which I haven't counted the signatures. So we have at least a fourth of the parents of the 3rd graders who feel very similar to those of us that were at the meeting today. We're concerned about the class size. We recognize your guidelines. We think they're excellent. And I think we all agreed at the meeting today that if they stay at that size, everybody will be pretty happy about it. However, you can't predict what's going to happen over this summer. Now, there was talk about a contingency plan, and I think we all agreed that that was an excellent solution to the problem. However, when we asked what the contingency plan was, we didn't feel like we got a very clear answer. So I would like someone to explain to me exactly what the contingency plan is. I would like to know at what point it kicks in. What will be the maximum class size at which we say, okay, this is enough, now we're going to do something else? The middle of August was mentioned as a good time to talk about this again. I would like to see it come up before the school board so parents can again put input into this issue. And I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Stephen Blattner. I have a 9.5-year-old who's in 3rd grade and a child in 1st grade this year. And I really haven't been aware of all of the discussions that you've had on this topic. I'm sort of a latecomer to the controversy, I guess, over class size versus class number. And I just wanted to make a couple of comments because when I heard about it, it happened to coincide with my son giving his weekly report about his experience in 3rd grade, which has been actually a difficult year for him, even though he's a very bright and very social kid, and we would have expected 3rd grade to have been really a very pleasurable experience for him. It's been kind of a rough year, and I think probably the reasons for that are many, but when I talked to him about it, one of the things that he identifies very clearly is the size of his class. And he's, in the educational system, he's been in a variety of settings. He's a child of 2 working parents who has been in daycare since he was 6 months old. The last time that he spoke to me seriously about problems in the classroom that he was in was actually when he was 3 in a daycare setting, educational daycare, where he came to me and he said, "Dad, I'm not learning anything anymore. There's no good toys. There's no good teachers. do something. And, we went in and looked around, and indeed he was correct. What had been very good for him the year before turned out not to be so good for him that year. And we ended up moving him to another setting that worked out very well. This year, he said to me, I talked to him a bit about next year and about educational options for him, and he said, Dad, there are too many kids in my class. My teacher can't really pay attention to me, can't really spend time with me. This begs the whole question. I know that the Gifted and Talented program has been under a lot of controversy, and I attended the meeting that was held last month about that, and I understand some of the dilemmas around programming for children that have different educational needs. But I think the observation that one teacher must have a rather difficult time speaking to all levels in a class of 20 some odd, it really needs to be listened to. And I think if you have an option fiscally to create a class of 19 versus a class of 23, that there may be some very good reasons for doing that. I understand that that the teachers in the fourth grade have been in favor of limiting class size, and I guess as a parent who wants to listen to the professional educators involved, I would encourage you to really listen to that. And I guess as just the last point, I have some just some real worries about the facility problems, which I know are real, being the issues that drive the educational programming. And I don't mean to minimize that. I understand that one can only fit so many pegs into so many holes. But if there is an opportunity, to limit class size and to perhaps do some creative shuffling, I think it would be of great benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the audience? Okay. Do you want to address
all of those issues? Well, yes. Contingency plan is one of those things that I think is exacerbated in this particular district because we only have 3 buildings. And the options for where you're going to put a class are really not very good. Frankly, what we have looked at is a possibility that by using some judicious shuffling, even though the middle school will be not only an extra grade, but also by the time you get through counting the numbers of kids in those grades, they'll be using almost the entire complex 5A. It looks like there'll be 1 extra room, which gives us 1 extra room to think about as far as what do we do. As far as what it is that would drive the contingency, my understanding was that the school board policy, which was passed some years ago, I'm not exactly sure when, but it's probably in the fairly recent past, sets 22 as a guideline for grade 4. Right now, with the numbers we actually have right now, we have 22 per section. Now, obviously, what can happen is that or 22 and a half, excuse me, there would be some at 23 and some at 22. What we don't know is in a small system with 6 sections, suppose 12 kids move in, that's obviously 2 more. That would be nice and neat, and if they all moved in by August, we would have no trouble making that decision. What would be troublesome is deciding who would be in the brick building and what are the separation. I certainly have heard, and it was reported in our discussion today, there are parents who feel quite concerned about a grade being separated. And that is another issue that we would have to wrestle with. We talked about, well, is there some other service that is in Pond Cove that can be put over in the 30s building? There's some, we are putting the music building room over there, and we do have an art room, but we also had a discussion about that in our transition team, and there is certainly mixed opinions on that issue. We've looked at special ed. We've looked at a variety of ways in which we could squeeze the situation around. I've worked in school systems where you go get a portable. Portables do not seem to be terribly popular in this town, and frankly, I don't know where I would put it. A couple of times in looking at the possibilities here, I've threatened to put 1 or 2 right out there in the mall. I don't know if anybody from the zoning board or the planning board is listening, but there are times when you simply you're out of options. But as far as this 1 grade and this 1 situation, which seems to have, is certainly the focus of this discussion, we clearly have 1 room, and we could, what we have in the budget is money that will allow us, we have a plan right now to go with 2 teacher assistants for a variety of reasons, however, that could also go for the extra section. It would take probably enough kids moving in so that we were up to the 24 stage before we would do that, because in fact it is not going to be a good solution. What we are afraid of, and one of the reasons why it's very hard to give you an absolute answer about how this would work, is that people don't tend to move by the 15th of August. They move in September. This is what happened with this year's fourth grade. When Mrs. Powers brought me the recommendation in the budget a year ago to not replace the third grade section and to cut the fourth grade section, she did not have any great concerns about the current third grade, but she did have concerns about the current fourth grade. And in fact, we had a few kids move in, which did kind of tip it up just that much, so that has been an issue, and we did opt for the 2 teacher assistants. So it has been a borderline situation by Cape Elizabeth standards, not by the state standards, which are at 25, or an average of 25, but obviously all of you have given this some thought, as we have naturally. Teachers have been involved in the discussion, and they would like to stay together. They're torn too, and some of you heard that in the meeting this morning. So all of these are issues we've looked at. There are no easy answers to these things. I would say, as far as a contingency plan goes, I certainly will be looking at this at the beginning of August and looking at it again for the August board meeting, which presumably will be the second week, and we will certainly put it on the agenda to discuss and make sure that people know that that is an item that is, what is going on. I can't tell you in all honesty that I think we'll have absolute answers by then, because of what I also know happens in September. But that, I think, is the best I can say at the moment.
Thank you. Rosemary.
Yes, Connie, do parents notify the superintendent when they are thinking about buying a house? Or, no, I'm sorry. I bought a house in August so that I would be set up for school 7 years ago, and I was just wondering, is there any way we can ask the realtors and the parents and the audience to ask the buyers to notify the superintendent if they have any students coming to our school?
Well, we can always ask. I have to tell you that it is not at all uncommon to open school and look around and say, who are you, dear? Oh. And also, people do not necessarily tell us when they're moving out. So, but the all we can do in a small school system with tight quarters and these issues is to do the best we can, ask for people's cooperation, and try to have as sensible a contingency plan as possible.
Okay. Other comments from the board?
I'd just like to make one comment. It's really a comment I made last month, but since there are a lot of new faces here, I'm going to make it again. I related my experience negotiating with the Teachers Association for some years, and how the subject of AIDS had always come up, and teachers had very persuasively advanced the argument that AIDS would solve a lot of their problems teaching. And so I was surprised when this issue came up, also because I think 2 years ago, within 2 weeks of Connie Goldman taking over as superintendent, and I was the chairman then, correct me if my recollection's wrong, but she said, "Where are your aides? You don't have very many aides." So for a number of years I have been laboring under the assumption that we should be increasing the number of aides if we possibly can. And I would just like to revisit that subject at some appropriate time, because it is a policy, it is a direction. And I've certainly read literature that supports that argument. But so I was surprised last month when the aides were not, when the class sizes were going to be within our long-established norms, that the aides were not seemingly as good an idea as I had perceived they were in the past. So when we talk about this, I would ask that issue be discussed at the same time.
Okay. Thank you. Other comments?
Just a couple of comments. I think everybody on the board is very interested in minimizing class size. I had the opportunity to come from a community which actually per capita outranked Washington, D.C. in terms of violent crime. Unfortunately, it was a smaller town, so it didn't get as much press. But I could never really be convinced that was in any way related to class size. I also have a son who's in 3rd grade and will be entering the 4th grade, and I agree entirely that it would be ideal to have 19 kids in a classroom. But not just for the 4th grade, for the 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, all the way up and up. And so while we focus on the 4th grade, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we're looking at an entire system. And that while we would very much like to have class sizes of 19, it's something that very clearly is not within our realm as far as the city council or the town council is concerned. So that our task is to use a very limited resource and to distribute it in a way that we feel is the most wise and will benefit everybody throughout the school system. So I hope we're doing that, and all our decisions are made with that thought in mind.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask why we decided on 2 aides. Was it financial? Was that the amount of money that we felt like we could spend? It seems like if we had 3 aides for 6 classes, then every day in the morning or every day in the afternoon, a teacher had an aide, and it wasn't Monday, Thursday, Friday, and that kind of. But was there some thinking?
Well, originally we had 2. The 2 we added to the budget this year because of the pressure on the 4th grade, we kept in the budget. We had absolutely no teacher assistants, non-special ed at Pond Cove, which was the source of my question to the board when I first came here. I was surprised because I'm used to seeing, especially in this day and age, where elementary teachers are expected to do curriculum conferences, they're expected to really work hard at parent contact and so on. Our teachers, where do they get the time to do those kinds of things? It's a real heavy burden, and I'm simply used to seeing elementary schools organized with some assistance. And I was curious why we didn't have them here. I certainly realize in building the kind of budgets that we've been building, there is no way we can have both reduced class size and teacher assistants. And when we added it this year, we certainly tried to take advantage of that by keeping them in the budget for next year. So we have 2 in the budget that will be concentrated at the 1st and 2nd grade level. The 2, partly it's a budget thing, but partly it was, we were sort of thinking, well, at least that'll give us 4. There are 4 grades there for teacher assistants. And then as this issue more and more developed, we began to see the possibilities of kind of picking up on, I think, what Peter is saying. There's a possibility of a neat pilot project with these teachers to really get some training. We've talked to some business people about how to help teachers think of themselves as managers of other people, not just managers of children's learning, but also learning how to manage other resources. And we saw that as a possibility to get at exactly the individualized attention that you're talking about. It is, of course, one of our hopes for becoming more coordinated in the use of parent volunteers. But this is asking teachers to take on a whole new dimension, which is managing adults rather than just managing children's learning. And I certainly would take on the responsibility of helping train that and helping the elementary school think through the use of a resource from an angle perhaps that they hadn't thought through. That is part of what we were talking about, so we thought maybe we could actually stretch our resources a little further that way. I certainly believe that the kind of national crisis we're seeing in education demands of all of us the freeing up our thinking about how we use resources. I, too, as a teacher, would like to have 15 youngsters, but that's not possible given our buildings, given our budgets, and we've got to try to at least open our thinking to what other ways there are. Now, that was part of the reason for that.
Any other comment? Okay, thank you. Next item is proposal from the high school staff and administration regarding this schedule change.
Well, we've already heard something from the students on this. I think there is an update. This is an issue that has come up as far as a focused issue in the last few weeks, but I do know, and in all fairness, have to say that the high school staff and administration have been discussing some kind of schedule change over a period of time. My guess is for longer than I've been around here, but I think there have been some real efforts to get a handle on the nuts and bolts of this, and so I really would turn this over to Frank Miles.
First, let me say that by way of introduction, we have been, in fact, talking about this for several years. But in a most formal way, we've talked about it, I think, this year off and on in different forums in the school and as a group, as a faculty for the last couple of months. And I appreciate what the students said earlier. I understand that, although I might not agree that a majority is one way or the other, I think that there is a strong feeling on the part of most students one way or the other, and I don't think they're necessarily neutral about it. But I take the point of view that, and I think my faculty colleagues do, that we have to make some recommendations based on what we think will provide the best instruction for students. And I think that the faculty overwhelmingly have decided that it would be in our best interest long-term to move to longer periods of instruction. I say that cautiously because I think we're giving good instruction now, but I think we feel we can make significant improvements on our instructional program if we have larger blocks of time within which to work. We voted as a faculty several weeks ago to move forward and extend class periods to longer blocks of time. We are determined to do that. At the moment, however, we have decided as of today that we cannot do that as well as we thought we could for September. So we are not planning to do that in September. We are planning to postpone that implementation of longer periods until we can work out a number of details. Among them, the schedule. Among them, some of the other logistical issues within the building, not so much unassigned or free time as making sure that we can get students the kind of program that we feel they should have. We're quite disappointed that we cannot move ahead in September because I think the faculty has been genuinely excited about the opportunity that teachers feel they have to make some significant changes in the way they are teaching some students. Some of those changes, if not most of those changes, are contingent upon having a larger block of time within which to work. What we have found in the short run is that we need to design the longer periods and our schedule from within our own instructional program. We have tried to work with a template, if you will, that several other schools are working with, and we find that at the moment we cannot make that work to our satisfaction. So what we are going to do is work on that over the summer and work on developing our own skills and making some curriculum plans which will support the kind of change we propose to make next year. I see this as an opportunity, this pause, if you will, and this movement towards extended period, to allow us to make sure that we put this plan into effect the right way. We feel that it is probably, it's a major shift, and I think one of the concerns of students, parents, perhaps board members, and the superintendent is it is the kind of major shift that will affect the way a school operates. But I think it's the kind of change in the model of school that we are talking about when we are talking about restructuring schools for learning in a different learning in different directions, I think, than we have in the past. And I think that the kind of collaborative learning we want students to do, the kind of problem solving we want students to do, the kind of, if you will, experiential or education learning by doing that we want students to do, the active role we want students to have in their education requires that both students and teachers have blocks of time which they can structure around those learning tasks rather than having structures of time in which they are constrained by the learning tasks they define for students. So what we propose to do is to use this period of time in the next 4 to 6 months before we make or come forward with further plans to implement a change in extended period to, if you will, fine-tune some of our ideas. And I think also it is clear we will work with students, because I think students need to understand why, and we need to hear what their reservations are. I would agree, and I think many faculty would, that sitting and listening to somebody talk for 80 minutes is not what we have in mind, nor what they have in mind, so I understand that. We will also, I think, have the opportunity to establish with some students some of the criteria by which they can provide us with some valuable feedback when we do move to a longer blocks of time as to how they are working, whether they are working the way we both understand, and some adjustments we can make in that. I want to say for a minute, though, that I think the notion of a trial is not necessarily, in this kind of a major shift, a trial somehow gets to the point where we're going to try something on and see if it fits. I think that what we need to do is make a certain commitment to make sure that it works as opposed to fits, and that people undertake the kind of preparation that they need to do to make the instructional format work. And I think that we are convinced that we can do that. Why don't I see what kind of questions you may have and let you see if I can respond to some of those. There are a number of faculty members here tonight. They do not necessarily plan to speak, but they are here because they are concerned about it, and in a number of cases here to indicate that they are behind that. I think there are also a faculty member or two who are not in favor of it. So, questions?
You had mentioned that you were, at this point, postponing it, and when would you anticipate revisiting it, or what would you...
Well, I think we plan to, we see another good point to perhaps make a shift at something like the mid-year break, the semester break in January, as a point where a number of classes change enrollments anyway and change teachers, but a number of others continue. And it's at that point where we feel we can, using I think the schedule which we are currently running, and which is, I think, a reasonable basis for beginning to make some extensions, do some work with extended periods. So we will be coming to you again with a report through the fall as to what our progress is and what we are planning to do and how we see ourselves doing it.
Would it be possible for teachers to choose between the period lengths so that... and then integrate that into the schedule?
In some cases, one of the reasons we liked the model that we're working on for the past several weeks is that it offers some flexibility in terms of modules of time that teachers can use for different classes. But I think that we want to keep, if you will, courses within a course as offered in the same time frame, and those are largely, I think, decisions that the departments and the faculty need to make rather than just individual teachers. But that's an interesting question. I think it just raises some logistical problems which are hard to deal with, but it's certainly one to consider.
Well, I have a question about the students. Would it be possible to hold a vote the same way one did for the faculty? I know it wouldn't be binding, but it would perhaps be informative.
Mm-hmm.
And preceding that vote, I should think there would be an effort by the various points of view to persuade,
Mm-hmm.
make their case.
Would you propose to do that on what on other issues of curriculum that we would?
I think I'm posing a question, and I'm not proposing to extend it to to a theoretical issue that might be significantly different or might be quite the same. I think I see where you're going with your question but the students and their parents are our customers, and I guess I was a little dissatisfied with the two sets of comments about well, maybe the majority is here and maybe it's there. is it on an issue like this worth trying to find out with a little more precision? Again, without it being a binding vote. It's not a binding vote as far as the faculty is concerned either, but it is very indicative of, how people feel about this issue.
That could perhaps be accomplished through the established system, which is the Student Advisory Council, where they are the representative of the students. And I may be wrong in how this representation occurs, but students could give their input to the members on the SAC. They could formally discuss it, address it, and come to some type of conclusion, and in a formal written manner present that to faculty just as their input in development of the curriculum, which I believe occurs on many fronts in the curriculum, or no?
Well, I certainly welcome student input, and I would not want to stand in the way of that. I guess I would not like to endorse the principle of putting things to a student vote as to what we do or don't do in the high school and what teachers do and don't do in their classrooms or how we decide the curriculum. On the other hand, I too am concerned about the satisfaction of customers with the product they get, if you will. So
Well, it's an opinion poll, in effect.
Yeah. I have no problem with an opinion poll. I see that different than a vote. So,
That's an important
if
distinction.
you want to sample student opinion, that I'd like to do. So in that sense, in that spirit, I'm very supportive of it. To put changes in the high school curriculum to a student vote, I'm not in favor of.
I agree with that. I think that's what I had in mind was more in the area of taking an opinion poll in some methodical way so that you don't get two kind of different interpretations of what the mood is at the same time, as we did this evening.
Yeah, and I think that the sampling of student opinion over the last 2 weeks by both students and faculty has yielded very different results, depending on to whom you spoke, both from the student point of view and from the faculty point of view. So that I'm not sure that other than having, I'm not sure that the SAC is necessarily representative of student opinion on this kind of an issue. I think they are on many issues. They may in fact be, but I'm not sure. They any more than any given teacher's class is representative of a group of student opinions on this, because a lot of teachers have also talked with their classes. So I think it does need to be a more consistent sampling of the student opinion. And that is what I would like to do in terms of keeping in touch with student ideas about this.
And I think it could go beyond just yes or no as an opinion poll for an automobile, even 4 doors versus 2 doors. One of the most important things I heard was whether or not really a teacher is just going to talk at the students for 80 minutes as opposed to 40. If that's really the case, well then I wouldn't be for 80-minute periods. But if you're going to get the group breaking down into discussion groups, or something other than just chalk and talk is going to take place, then I would be more favorably inclined.
Yeah, and I think in talking with students, they would agree with that. I think the question in some cases is just what they see as happening or not happening, or likely to happen, their estimation of it. So I think, even in the SAC meeting the other day, there were students who said, well, I can see how it would work well here, and I can see how it wouldn't work well there. So I understand that there's a range on any of these issues, and we will sample that range.
Frank, are you looking for specific student outcomes from this, specific ways that students' educational experience will be improved? Will do you expect test scores to go up? Or they be better prepared when they get out of school? Or what's the educational reason for doing
Yeah,
that?
I think on the issue of test scores, I am confident that there will be a change in test scores and an improvement in test scores, but the tests are also changing, and that's one of the things that the curriculum needs to respond to. For example, we are beginning to work on different kinds of tests, because the SAT tests and other tests are beginning to examine higher order thinking skills in a way they don't now. think we believe that in order to teach students higher order thinking skills, you don't talk to them for 40 minutes or 80 minutes. You have to have them engaged in activities using those skills, and that's why we think that the longer blocks of time will permit that kind of teaching. I think that we want students also to be able to work in groups, solving problems as groups. This is not something students are used to doing in schools. I think the culture of schools has, in the past, focused a lot on individual activities and the individual as sort of the locus of learning in a situation. I think what we are learning from our society is we need to change that model of student learning in schools so that students work more in groups, having to exchange ideas, rely on, in a sense, do more teamwork, very much what they're used to doing on an athletic field, but not necessarily used to doing in a classroom. And yet most adults spend much of their lives working in groups with other adults to solve problems. We do not model that in schools, and we believe we need to do that, and that the kind of problems we need to present in our curriculum, whether it's in physics or math or English or foreign language or social science, is of the nature that requires collaboration. It's that just simply takes a different time format than simply a short batch of time on a given day, 5 days a week. And it requires a different kind of preparation for students. We would expect that the longer blocks of time will in fact enable us to prepare students better for both tests as well as for the outcomes of working in groups, working on projects, writing papers, doing research in our library, which students are doing more of this year, and thanks to the faculty. And the students, I think, find that useful and interesting.
Can I just ask one more thing? Going beyond the idea of an opinion poll, which I think is fine, have you given any thought to sitting down with groups of students in a forum where they can bluntly state what is on their mind and what their resistance is to this idea?
Yes, we will do that in a number of forums, and I think many faculty members have sat down and talked with their classes. I think they've given class time in the last few weeks to that. But we have now an extended block of time which to proceed apace on working through some of student concerns as well as faculty aspirations for this kind of change.
Do you plan to include the parents in the dialogue?
Yes. We, I thought, had an interesting conversation almost a week ago, on Wednesday night last with parents, and would very much like to involve parents in this so that in the fall we can plan some evenings where we can sit down with parents and continue the conversation about what goes on in the classroom and what we propose should go on in the classroom in these extended periods. I'm not sure that I don't want to make the extended periods out to be magic. I think what we're going to be able to do is do more of some of the things we like to do now in those periods in terms of group activities, problem-solving activities, even some focused seminars in some cases that take more than the 35 to 40 minutes that you end up having profitably in a class period.
What was the reason that this wasn't done prior to the first introduction of this?
Well, I think what we had this spring was a commitment of the faculty and sort of a realization that if they were going to make the change for next year, in their view, the best time to make it would be when we build a schedule this spring, if we could get that done and do it well. And it was my judgment today that we were not going to be able to get it done well. And I think that they felt that although there are always unanticipated consequences of something like like this that we felt we had a good handle, and I think we do, on what those are likely to be. But I think we feel that if we don't have a good schedule, we are really not able to make the step correctly. And I think that when I say a good schedule, I mean a good schedule that uses these extended periods the way we were trying to do so. And I think now we are going to have the opportunity to rethink some of our fundamental assumptions about the structure of that schedule, not so much the need for the longer period. But it's a much more complicated issue than just whether we have an 80-minute period or not. It's how you put them together and where you put them that is some of the problem.
I know you're aware that part of the criticism of the Scarborough program was that it was changed in midstream, in the middle of the school year. In fact, it may have been changed quarterly, or at least.
Yeah, it was changed several times in the school year.
And I know that it was commented on that would not be a problem that we would face. And now we are faced with changing our time schedules in the middle of the year.
Yeah, I think interestingly, we've had some conversations with Scarborough High School administrators and teachers over the past few weeks, as the students have with the students. And I think one of my colleagues, Nancy Hutton, was involved in a research project last fall with some of her fellow doctoral candidates on the whole issue of school change during the year. And if I understand it correctly, and I think I do, having one change in a year is not seen by the students at Scarborough or by the faculty or by students or faculty in other schools as a problem. It's when you have several changes going on. That is, Scarborough tried 2 or 3 different versions of a schedule last year, plus they moved out of their building at one point of the year down to SMTC and moved back to the building at another point in the year at from SMTC into their new building, as they had to, I guess they moved them out for asbestos and construction and so on. So they had a very turbulent year, and by the admission of their administration, they would not repeat that year willingly again. On the other hand, the principal did say, or the director of instruction, I guess is the correct term, that in fact students did not, the student opinion was that the 60-minute that Scarborough worked on, and they are coming from a 7-period day, and it's, without getting into the whole technicalities of 7 and 8 periods and why we have them, although perhaps that's something we ought to do next fall in a workshop. It might be kind of interesting as to how we put it together and why we have 8 periods, for example. They found that 42 minutes was too short, and they felt that 75 minutes was too long, and that 60 minutes seemed to be the one that they have. They now have 5 60-minute periods in a day, and they like that very much. They go to school from 7:50 until 1:45. They're half an hour or a little more than a half an hour shorter than we are. They have 7 minutes of passing time. They do have science labs that have an additional 20-minute period. It is a different model. And what they developed that out of their own experience as a school. And I think what we have discovered in the last 2 weeks in trying to put together a model that would work for us is we need to do exactly the same thing. We need to sit down with the fact that many of our students like to take 6 and 7 courses. And not so much every day, but they like to have those in a semester, and that is more than many students in other schools take. So that, given the fact that, if you will, our clients want more course selection, we have more multiples of periods to deal with it. That adds to the complexity of the whole process. One of the advantages we see in cutting down the number of periods in a day is it cuts down on the number of things students have to focus on, the number of interruptions in the day. Now, how we could do that is different, but I think one change in a year could be managed. I don't propose that, nor are we thinking about multiple changes for exactly the reason that it is unsettling. And that's why when you asked when would I do that, I suggested the semester, which is a natural break and a point of change anyway.
One more thing. Are you open to any other time schedules other than the one that is now proposed?
Yes. I have looked.
If Scarborough said 75 minutes is too long, I mean, you'll try to understand that. And
yes, and other schools are saying, other schools, different schools have different period lengths. The norm in Maine is 42, but in going to, some schools that go to these extended periods go 100 minutes. Our feeling was that, that would be too long. Some schools use 75 minutes, some 60. And I think that we will look at different ones, and we have in the past. We've looked at different blocks. There are various advantages and disadvantages in that, for example, Scarborough's rotation takes 7 days to rotate through their schedule and have a complete cycle of their schedule. That appeals to some schools and doesn't to others. And again, this is somewhat of a way that the program meshes together.
Number one, I apologize for being late for the first time in 3 years. And having attended your parent information night the other night, I expressed my concern about the time frame for implementation. And in those things was the process, the logistics, the staff development, the building management issues, and finally the student involvement in the process. And I feel a great sense of relief that this is not going to take place in September. It's not that I'm against it, but I just felt that the process required more than what you had put into it.
I can top Loretta. May I have permission from the board to ask one more question on Loretta's total? Frank, I would like to ask, we're looking basically at the Oak Hill High School and Sabattis model.
Well, that's the one we've considered at this point, yeah.
Okay, I would like to follow up on Loretta's comment. I would very much like to see additional lengths of time. I have gone through the independent school booklet that talks about the daily activities of their schools, and for the most part they are 42 and 45 minutes, and they are 6-hour days. And it was just, I had that resource available to me. There were supposedly 10 other schools in the southern Maine area who were looking at that Oak Hill schedule. The day you were there was a report in the paper.
I don't know that the number that are looking at Oak Hill. I know of a number of other schools that are considering extending their periods in the area, and I also know that there are several others than Oak Hill in Maine doing it now. And it's not unique to Maine at all. It's really taking place in many states. As I said the other night, a number of schools in Colorado have used 80-minute periods and used them very differently, one from the other. So it's not a new block of time, nor is it limited to Maine.
Okay, and I was wondering what would happen on the early release days to the schedule. These are, I don't need to answer, these are just some of the concerns that I had. Also, I was concerned in looking at the fact that next year you'll have approximately 40 more students in the high school than you currently have, and then the year after, the combination of this September and next September's totals will be approximately 90 students more than right now.
I'm not expecting 40 more students next year, so if they're coming, I'm in for a big surprise. I'm expecting about the same number of ninth graders as we have seniors.
I'm sorry, I meant the year.
The year after that, you're correct. Then I'm expecting them. Okay. Next year, I'm not.
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Nancy Hutton reassures me that I'm on target. Okay.
But
right. A year from this fall, we will start increasing our freshman class roughly by 40 students each year, so that over a period of 4 years, we would end up with 160 more students total in the high school, over roughly 560, 580 students.
So I would be very interested in the accessibility to courses by that many more students because of the schedule, because I also think that there'll be a problem with some of the students getting the courses that they want or need, because there will be more people trying for those courses. So I just thought I would throw into the mix a possibility of going to a 6-period rotation with approximately 60 minutes and 30 minutes for lunch, just as a possibility of something that I looked at. And I like some of the parents that are here, which they may or may not choose to speak. But my concerns, quite frankly, as a parent of 2 teenagers, is the ability of students to sit still, concentrate, and and do all those things for 80 minutes. A couple of the teachers have suggested there might be as much as a 10-minute break during the 80-minute segment, which to me is a 70-minute period with a 10-minute break, which means that over a 2-week period, there would be approximately 50 minutes less instructional time if we go to that model. So I was just concerned about that. And I understand it's not just time, it's the quality of what is taught in that time. But I'm very interested in what goes on in the 6.5 hours the kids are in school. And I've recently read or reread my TQM guidelines, and the first thing it says is do the right things right. And although this may be the most right thing we've done with scheduling at the high school for a while, I do think that there are a lot of issues that you've become used to hearing in the past week that need to be considered, and I'm glad to see that you're waiting.
Well, I appreciate your concern. I think that one of the things we do feel is that this we absolutely want to do the right thing, which we believe this is, and we want to do it the right way, which is one reason why, since we didn't feel we could, we said, okay, we'll pause. I want to talk about attention span for a minute. I'm not sure. I think that the attention span is going to depend on what people are doing. I think that adolescents can pay attention for 80 minutes or 120 minutes or even 4 hours, depending on what they want, whether they like what they're doing and are engaged in it. And I think that's the key. And I think the students would agree with that. I think that their fear about being lectured to for 80 minutes is that would be tough. And I think that many of us as adults would agree with that. So that I understand their fear in that, and I think that's true, and we can all identify, I think, with that. But I think the commitment that the faculty made when they, I think very clearly and overwhelmingly said that they wanted to move in this direction was that they wanted to change the way they teach, and that this is somewhat of a chicken and an egg argument here, which comes first. And I think that what the faculty is trying to say is that they need to come simultaneously. Now, I'm not going to get into the chicken and egg on that one, but I think that in terms of the teaching change and the learning change, that's what they want to see. So we will look at different formats, and we will see how that the 660. The question is simply how do we work that out for people, and whether that fits the needs of the school. And I think what we have the time to do now is to devise our own template, if you will, for the schedule. Make sure it fits us.
I would like to compliment the staff on making a decision to go ahead with change. I think that's wonderful. And I hope that my comments about this situation are not taken by staff or administration to think that I am in any way opposed to doing things differently or doing them better. My concern was just the speed in which we were progressing with this. The other comment that I just had, well, when I play back the tape on what your last comment was, I'll call you up and ask you. I'm sorry. I lost it.
And she will, too.
Oh, I know she will. And I really welcome not only your questions, but also questions and concerns of parents, because I agree with Loretta that we do not want to exclude parents. I think that the parents get a lot of their information about how this feels from their children and from the students. So I think that it's useful to have both sets of customers. And one of the, I think, interesting things about a high school is that the students are quite outspoken and articulate customers, and need to be involved as young adults in this. But I also am sensitive to their, not only their concerns, but also the fact that the faculty needs to have some empowerment to make some decisions that it thinks are best for the instruction, because they are the ones who are held responsible for it.
Other questions or comments?
Yes, he said the word students, and that triggered my mind.
There we go.
One of the things that I'm concerned about with students, even in the current schedule, is that some of them don't seem to be able to manage the time that they have when they're not in the structured classroom, and some of them seem to think that learning only takes place in the classroom. They haven't quite accepted the fact that they can do a lot of things on their own. So I was just wondering if there's a possibility for structured study halls or study skills or math labs or language arts labs or something of that nature?
In fact, the faculty is very interested in moving in that direction, and one of the balancing acts is to set up the opportunities and then also to have them staffed and yet still have the kind of structure that you're talking about. And one of the things that the math department is doing is creating a math lab, and it is going to assign students to that math lab. And we have an English skills program which functions in a different way, but offers some of the same kind of support. I think students do need continued guidance as to how to use their unassigned time. I will say, however, I find more and more students using a facility like our library this past year, and I think that the impetus of that comes both from the classroom teacher as well as from the students finding the resource useful, but the teachers are trying to make use of that and also have students use their unassigned time for that. I was struck in a conversation with another school official who uses a longer period, that having the longer period days requires students to be more organized. When you don't meet your class every day, you have to, if you will, make some decisions about time management and work organization that you have to learn to plan ahead. And I think that is something that fits into both your concern about students using time better and our concern about both students and teachers using time in the best possible way.
Any other comments, Charlie?
Just a couple of words of caution. One is communication. I think if we've learned anything from this, that you need to communicate to your clients, which are your students. And having seen students in the high school this year in a couple of processes, I think they're very effective. And one of them is the athletic contract. And if you empower those kids to be a part of the process, I think you'll have better success than if you try to jam it down their throats.
Yeah, it was not our intent ever to jam it down their throats, but I agree that having the time to involve them in the process is a very constructive and effective way to do it.
Anybody else on the board? One last thing. I don't think it takes away from the teacher empowerment at all, as Charlie said, to involve, to communicate with the people. I think that was really very important. In fact, I think that the teachers and you learn from the questions that people ask and the comments that they have, because there was no committee working on this, the school board was not involved in this. The Parents Forum begs for programs. This wasn't offered as a program, a discussion. It didn't go before the student government. It just happened. And people were, I think people even who would have been very in favor of it were real skeptical just because it just happened. And so I'm happy also for the additional time to work on this. And if you don't feel like it's in place, I would even suggest that you perhaps take a whole year if it's needed, or use that as an incentive to move right ahead and get a lot of information out and a lot of opportunities for discussion in place in the fall.
I think your suggestion is excellent. I think we have a commitment to not do it until we think it is in place, and I don't know whether it's useful to predict whether it should take 6 months or a year, but I think that we are committed to doing it, you know, with not with without really touching those bases, and we will take the time to do that.
Any comments from the public on the 80-minute period?
I would be glad to send you some that I have on it, but so that if you'd like give me your name and address, I'll see that you get it, right? But I think it's not the only model, and I think that's one of the other things that has come tonight. I think we're committed to sort of developing our own version of a schedule for our students. There was one other person, Jenny.
Yes. Yes, please come to the microphone and identify yourself and make your comment.
Hi. After the nice recognition that you all gave me a little earlier, I feel funny causing any controversy, but I'd like to speak. My name is Jenny Higgins, and I am the president of the SAC at the high school. And even though this is not going to be implemented this fall, I'd like to share some of the concerns that the SAC had when we talked about it. And we've talked about it several times. In fact, I think the reason that we might not have had a vote is that we only have 42 minutes for the meetings, and often by the end of the class, you know, there's so many concerns that we haven't even gotten through half of them. I'd like to just reiterate some of the things that Lori was saying, which I think a lot of the SAC members agree with. We've been told that, you know, many of the teachers, the majority of the teachers are in favor of this change, and that's great. However, I think it might be assuming too much to think that they're all going to be really willing, or not willing, but able to change their teaching styles to accommodate it. You know, there's a saying that the 3 reasons to become a teacher are June, July, and August. And to ask them to all of a sudden give up their summer months to learn more teaching skills to do this is a lot to ask. So I think that we really need to think about how many teachers are going to be able to change their 40-minute lecturing, whatever, in order to accommodate this. Another concern is that there are several teachers, although many never let this happen, that even in a 40-minute period allow students to leave 5 to 10 minutes early. Sometimes it's just because the material has been too difficult to get through, or it's been very difficult, so they need a break, or what they've covered for the day has been accomplished, so we'll let you go early or go to lunch or whatever. So, you know, in an 80-minute period, I can easily see that transforming into 10, 20 minutes, I'm not sure, but there is early dismissal as it is in this schedule, so that's another concern that maybe we could look at. One other concern that we had was that I think some of the new teaching methods that will hopefully be implemented are more group sessions, or more working with computers, or more, you know, hands-on type things. And people were concerned that not as much material as in past years would be covered, because we would be doing these other things to sort of get us out of the lecturing mode. So in an attempt to get us up and moving, we would not be covering as much material as in former years. Just in general, not so much specific concerns with the program. I've heard a lot of you say things such as "it just happened," or the communication. I think a lot of the students were offended with the way it was, you know, this is going to happen whether you like it or not, but we'd be happy to let you know what the advantages are and the disadvantages are, and that was really helpful. But some of us were thinking, you know, we were not notified of this at all until it really actually was going to go into effect. So I hope that in the next semester or even year that the students can have a little bit more opportunity, because I know that the SAC was the only group who actually sat down with Mr. Miles and talked about it. Just one other thing, some of the concerns of the student council members, we just, a lot of them didn't really understand the reasons for the 80-minute period when, one, 4 years ago there was a 75-minute period, as far as I'm aware, once a day or once every few days, that really did not go well, and the students really did not like it. And, you know, why are we reiterating the 80-minute period when that was not successful at all? And when Scarborough didn't find that it worked, you know, and they found 60 minutes, how come we're not going for that? So those were just other things. But like Laura was saying, there are students like myself who are willing to do it. Obviously, everybody has to be willing to do it because we don't have very much say, but I think that there are people who are saying, no, this is the way it's going to be, so we can, I think some of my classes would be great with this 80-minute period schedule. So, although I think a lot of the kids have questions, with hopefully some communication and other things, those will be overcome, and I think some kids will really enter it with open minds. I don't know if you had any questions about that at all. Anybody? Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Hill, and I'm the president of the senior class at the high school. A lot of things Jenny said, I was going to say as well. I'd just like to add one more thing. One of the great assets of Cape Elizabeth High School is the diversity of the teachers and their teaching styles. Throwing the way it is now, and I'd like to applaud the administration for their 180-degree turn as far as involving teachers and parents, but I guess, hey, better late than never. Anyway, the diversity of the teachers, expecting the teachers to change halfway through the year is absolutely ludicrous. Mrs. Pond asked the question, I think she let Mr. Miles off a little easy. Why? Why change in the middle? And I think that as a school board, you need to recognize that. And I urge you to make sure that the plan, if it is instated, starts next September, not in January. Anybody have any questions? Rosemary, Mrs. Reed.
Mr. Hill, Matthew, you're a senior right now, so this decision will not impact you in any way?
I have absolutely nothing to gain or lose by being here tonight.
Okay.
I'm here as a role model because far too many students don't know that they can speak out and don't know to speak out.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Anybody else?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that there's a major lack of communication in the high school.
Could you identify yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Matt Hayden. I'm a freshman at this point in time. I'll be a sophomore next year.
Thank you.
There's a lack of communication in the high school. Mr. Miles said tonight that it won't be started until January, which puts me in sort of a bad spot because I was here to talk about getting rid of the 80-minute period altogether. I would like to say that I did talk to a few teachers that did oppose this also. I also passed a petition around saying with disapproval of the 80-minute period, and to my surprise, a lot of people wouldn't sign it because of confusion, lack of communication again, and they were basically misinformed. Last year, we experienced 80-minute English periods while I was in the 8th grade. A lot of my fellow students say that didn't work because it was boring. A lot of promises were broken, such as a 10-minute break, which I think is a bit ridiculous. My older sister experienced a 70-minute period, and she thought that it was totally ineffective, and 80 minutes is really too long. We will, I just think that it's really unneeded. I think that our schedule at this point in time is fine. I like it, a lot of people like it, and there needs to be a change in communication in the high school. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
My name is Dan Coffey, and I'm also a freshman this year. I disagree with Matt Hayden, and he already mentioned that we did have the 80-minute periods last year in English. And in my class, other freshmen have expressed similar views, but they do need to realize that we did go through it last year, and in my particular class, we made it work by cooperating with the teacher, giving her feedback as to how we thought it was working. This happened constantly, and we did make it work by expressing feedback to and from the teacher. It became a more positive experience for us when we told her that maybe this wasn't working, could we do it this way? Or if we communicated in other ways. To me, this 80-minute period that we had last year not only resulted in stronger English skills, but stronger grades. Strong enough grades to put me in an honors English class this year, something I never would have thought happened entering 8th grade. I feel that similar results would come from all classes being extended, and we could benefit from applying the knowledge we learned in class that day that we learned it. For example, I'm in an algebra class right now. We were constantly faced with the problem of, well, we've learned this today, but can we apply it in class? Or do we have enough time to really work on this concept? Whereas math is not a strong subject for me, I tend to get into class, learn a formula, for example, and forget it. I may have to go home and memorize it or find some other way to learn it on my own, not in class. Or science labs, for example. This year in my environmental science class, we spent a lot of time saying, well, we have a lot of notes to take, but we also have this to do, so I'm going to have to shorten this for the notes so we can move on to something else. And students, I feel, also need to realize that not only the students will need to be changing their attention spans, but the teachers will need to be changing their programs as well. It's both sides having to change their current ways of working right now. Once again, if we work together like we did last year, I feel that we can make it happen, make it work, by exchanging feelings and expressing our opinions with the teacher once this gets implemented. To me, school is an institution that makes use of the time provided in the best way possible to give us the best possible education. In the 80-minute English program last year, I watched not only my skills, but my grades increase. I feel that extended periods would bear similar results. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Safer, and I'm the president of the sophomore class this year. I came here tonight with the intention of talking nothing about the actual schedule that was proposed, just about the communications. I feel that even though I'm in a position where I'm on the SAC and I'm the president of my class and I'm very involved in the community, I had no idea about the schedule until about 2 weeks ago. And at that point, I mean, I don't have enough information to have really an opinion on the schedule, on the extended periods. I feel that it was proposed in a manner that was, this is what's happening. Do you disagree with it? If so, fine, but it's going to happen anyway. And I think that that's entirely wrong. We were approached in the SAC, and it was presented to us. They were saying when it was presented that we would have an opinion, and it was, you know, the students and the parents and the teachers and the school board and everybody was going to work together, but that it was going to happen. And I think that since we have a break now, that before we go any further, I think that there should be something established which would say that the SAC needs to have some kind of a vote, the students need to have a vote, the parents need to have a vote, just even if it's only an opinion, just so we can see if we really want to make this change. Because I think there's enough opposition to having a change in the schedule that shows that maybe it's not even worth pursuing. I think that before we go any further, that everybody should have some kind of view, because as much as I respect the administration's desire to change the schedule or to change the system, I think that it might be entirely worthless if nobody is in support of it at all. So I think that that's the first thing that needs to happen. And that's basically all I have. I don't know if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good evening. Randall Ray, teaching the high school. I said I wasn't going to do this, but I decided I should come up. I'd like just to say a couple of things. I think there are obviously some concerns among students that have been very well expressed. I think we need to understand, or I guess I'd want to let you know that there are faculty members who really do support that we can do something better than we're doing today. That we did not lightly, in our discussions, which were many, simply decide that we would spring upon the students, the parents, some wild-eyed scheme. We have talked for quite a while about how we might improve the education at Cape Elizabeth High School. And we would not simply take on the task of trying to make things better without making a commitment. And I just feel very strongly that whether we do this now or whether we do it later, whether we don't do this at all, that we need to understand that we feel that there are some things that can be improved. Whether we stay with the schedule we have, we can improve. But there is enough feeling that we can make better use of the time and the students' time in a process that will get them more than simply coverage. And I just feel strongly that even though there seems to be a real breakdown of understanding that this was not something that was just hatched overnight, like let's change the schedule. And many of the teachers who are veteran teachers feel the same way. And I don't intend to speak for them. I can feed you back from my department. I know some of the others. And I just feel it's important to let you know that. And I have talked with some, and I think you know that too. Can we do a better job? I'm sure we can. Is this the way? We think it may be. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other?
Good evening. Carrie Hall, Department of English at the high school. I'd like to speak for those faculty members who still have a great many questions. There is no question in my mind about one thing, and that is our commitment to your children. We work very hard. We expect to work very hard. We even enjoy 90% of the time working very hard. But we want to do things right. And to do things right, we need to have time, we need to have research, we need to have communication. All of this did transpire off and on over a period of 2 years. But it did seem to be in a less than organized manner. And things just seemed to come together in the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks is not enough time to prepare adequately for our students. What those of us would like to have who are very, very concerned and have more questions than answers is a 1-year study period, a committee to be formed with school board, Superintendent Goldman or her appointed representative, faculty, students, parents, and interested members of the community who do not necessarily have children in the school, but do enjoy knowing what goes on. We'd like to look at a lot of different things. 80 minutes may not be appropriate, 60 may not. But before we even get into that, we need to question whether or not the 8-period day isn't working sufficiently well for our students. We have top-notch scores. We have students getting into wonderful colleges. We need to look first at, if we're going to make a change, should it just be the schedule? Restructuring is a buzzword this year. It's not a new idea. It's been around for several years. Scheduling is just a subdivision of restructuring. If indeed we want to make our schools better, then we should look at a very large picture. I repeat, scheduling's a small corner of that large picture. If we find that scheduling is something that needs to be addressed, then let this committee, over the course of the next school year, gather all sorts of data, share it publicly, periodically, perhaps once a quarter, updates for all that are interested, and then in a timely fashion present a report at an open roundtable discussion, a report that can be shared with the entire community. Let this be a community decision made in such a manner and at such a time that our backs are not to the wall scheduling students for the following year. We are really worried about making a change mid-year. We may have young adults at the high school, but we also have students who need security, and to play with the schedule, even at what appears to be, for some classes, a natural half-year break, can be threatening. I suggest that we make a decision sometime very soon, as the high school does need to schedule its students, to implement our present 8-period schedule, which has to this date served us well. Give our students the security of knowing where they're going next year, who is teaching them, that the teachers have the time this summer to prepare. Let us go forward with what we know while we take a year to plan for the year after. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Peters. I have 2 boys who are freshmen, and we've worked with this school system for 11 years and have been most impressed and are most happy to have worked with Mr. Miles and others in the high school administration. I do concur with the remarks of Mrs. Hall. My wife and I are quite uncomfortable with this change. Perhaps it is because of ignorance. This has been quite enlightening this evening, and I've enjoyed hearing the various comments both back and forth. And I do support Mrs. Hall's proposal that we study this additionally. I'd like to know what's broken before we fix it, and I'd like to know more specifics of what we intend to address and what specifically we intend to do with our extra time. Also, I'd like to know how we intend to evaluate a change of this sort, and who would be evaluating it, and what we would do or how we would determine if it's not working well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Judy Liberty, and I'm a French teacher at the high school and chairman of the Foreign Language Department. I'd like to say that I support this change in schedule, but I'm very concerned this evening at some of the things that I've heard. I didn't intend to speak, but the devil made me do it. I'm really concerned about some of the students' comments. I've been a school teacher for 17 years, seven of them in Cape Elizabeth, and I can assure you that the reason for that is not June, July, and August. I'm really upset about some of the comments of the students, and I just want to reiterate what some other people have said, that those of us who feel pretty strongly that this is a sound educational change do so with the interest of the students in mind and for no other reason. And we welcome the fact that there will be input from more people, given the fact that we'll have more time to think about this. But I think my concern tonight, as I've been sitting here listening, is I'm beginning to wonder, what is it that we as a faculty or as an educational community have a say on? I guess what I'm saying is, do we as a faculty have the ability to ask for this change, or do we require the students to have a vote on it? Do we require so much input? Or I guess what I'm saying is, are we going to be going through a process only to have it impossibly ended after a great deal of work? I guess I'd like to know at some point, what is the process for change is my real question here tonight. What is the process for change that we should be looking at, and how should that work? And I think we all need to think about that, and I think this issue has given us a lot of time to do that. And I'd like an answer to that question sometime. I'm sure this isn't the time or the place, but I think that's one of the major issues underlying all of this. What is our process for change here, and what should it be? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment?
I'd just like to let everybody know that I have been listening very carefully to the various comments, and I appreciate them, both of parents and faculty and students. I think I and many faculty are now aware very clearly at how students felt themselves pushed on this. And I think I would only say that we will take the time to do the kind of processing that needs to be done. Whether we propose a change in January or a year from September, we will let that process dictate that rather than some sort of artificial target that we can put up on the wall. I do want people to know that although this may have seemed like it was something that we wanted to put through quickly, our reason for doing so was simply that there is, if you will, a window of opportunity, and it seemed to us that this was not an opportunity that we took lightly or that we wanted to in some way not treat carefully. It was for that reason that, in fact, we decided not to go ahead. However, I think that we will now use the time we have to work a process out with students and parents and faculty members to make sure that we do not leave stones unturned, and we will be able to make a recommendation based on that process that I think will be very constructive for students, faculty, and the school.
Thank you. Okay. Let's move on to the community dialogue meeting.
Zip through.
That was about 80 minutes we spent incidentally on that subject, in case anybody wants a frame of reference.
Actually, I appreciate Judy's question, because I think that that leads right into the community dialogue meeting. We have, earlier this year, we invited the community as well as the staff to engage in small group activities that generated a lot of comments about the vision and the mission of the school system. We have now put together a draft mission statement. It will be in the Courier. It is a draft, and it is, as I reread it, I keep seeing all kinds of things that I wish I could immediately change as far as either the format or some of the wording, and that is the nature of a draft. It has been very difficult. I didn't write it totally. I took it from various sources and had other people read it and write parts of it. So we invite the community back again, and I know it's a busy time, and I don't know how many people will take us up on that, but on Tuesday, May 26th, 2 weeks from today at 7:30 in the high school cafeteria. I understand next door will be the dress rehearsal of My Fair Lady, so if you get tired of the discussion on the dialogue, you can kind of, sit out there in the corridor and listen. In all seriousness, I have been in education for 30 years myself, and I have been through all kinds of changes and given a great deal of serious thought to not only what we ought to be doing as individual teachers, but how in heaven's name can we as a community set priorities? How can we possibly exist, especially when we have national and local times of budgetary constraints? And if you just pay attention to even some of the diversity of opinions that have been expressed tonight, it is very obvious that it is extremely difficult to understand exactly what the right things are, let alone doing them right. So that this process is one I take very seriously, and I hope that people, if you're unable to come that night, and I don't expect that we will come to final answers that night either, but this is an ongoing process, and the board will be reviewing this mission statement as part of its June board meeting. If they feel so inclined, they can adapt whatever revisions we make, but it will be guiding the goal-setting process for the upcoming year, and we will be reviewing the goals that we set for this year. And in doing that, I hope it becomes clearer what the change process is, because we do obviously have stakeholders from all kinds of parts of the system, to say nothing of the students, and you know, it is in fact a difficult issue. But the hour is late, so I will move on. The last day of school is June 17th. In case anybody wants to know, it is a workshop day because the last snow day we had was a workshop day. We've had a number of questions from parents, and unless anybody has any questions, I think that's the end of that item. I do see Gail Parker here, who we were going to put in under communications, and I didn't see her at the time. Gail, do you want to share with us about the sign course?
Hi, thank you, Connie. Gail Parker. I teach 5th grade in the intermediate unit, and I also had the pleasure of continuing to teach the sign chorus, the Signs of the Sunrise, which have come before you on several occasions, frequently asking permission for some bizarre activity, whether it's traveling to New York or Washington, D.C., or New Jersey, or a little farther away to Romania one year. And the board has always been extremely supportive of the group, as have the parents and the community at large. And I wanted to share with you the information that I received a week or so ago, and that is that the Signs of the Sunrise was nominated by a parent in the community for the America's Future Awards, which are sponsored by WCSH-TV. And although we were not one of the, I think it's 6 winners that they choose per year, we were selected to receive a certificate of recognition and a letter of congratulation, and we will be, I think, included in the credits at the end of the program if you stay and watch it that long. But I wanted to share that with you along with the letter. The sign chorus is something which is near and dear to the hearts of a relatively small group of participants and a very large group of audience members. It's not by whim or by impulse that we choose to do sign language. Sign language is the 4th most commonly used language in the United States. And you almost never see it in a high school curriculum or a middle school curriculum. We do a lot with foreign languages, and yet this is one which locks people out just as much as the language barrier of Spanish to English does. It's something which not only enhances our performances and the beauty of them, but gives each member of the group a communication skill that's theirs for life. We have found over the years that members of Sign Chorus have found this to be an asset in a variety of ways. We have students who frequently find they have an edge in the job market because of that signing skill, whether it's working part-time at McDonald's or working in a law office as an intern, or going out. In some cases, we have even had students who have gone into this as their full-time career, working in the world of the hearing impaired and all of those job fields. It's something which, even if they never do anything more with it in a planned way, as a community volunteer or whatever, they still have that language facility. They've learned it not in a classroom, I grant you. They've learned it in a choral group, which may be a little bit out of the ordinary. But at the end of the first year, the average member of the group has a working vocabulary of somewhere between 300 and 400 words. And they also, because of the essence of sign language and the fact that it can also be used with finger spelling, as they call it, they have the capability of finger spelling any word that they don't know the sign for. So their communication is perhaps slow, but it is far from limited. And it's something that is not often thought about when people sit and just watch it and they see the flow of the hands and the shape of it. But this is something which goes with these students for many, many years and which helps break down that barrier. And I was really excited that that was recognized by Channel 6 and by the parent who took the time to fill out the application. So I will share with you a copy of the letter of congratulations that I sent to the parents and the copy of the award and the letter which I received from WCSH. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. Next, school board subcommittees and reports. First, a finance subcommittee report from Peter Leslie.
We don't have a report, but I would like to comment on an extraordinary sentence, extraordinary to me anyway, that was in this morning's paper in describing the final approval of the town budget. And toward the end of the article, there was a sentence that implied that perhaps the school board would be going back in certain circumstances to the town council for further funds. And as chairman of the finance committee, that was sure a surprise to me. I assume that my colleagues know nothing about that either, but I thought I should just state publicly that the school board has not given any consideration to that whatsoever. So that's my report, except for calling on my colleagues if they have comments on financial matters that took place in the last month, projects they've been working on. Rosemary?
I just wanted to reinforce that point, Peter. When I read that, quite frankly, I was trying to figure out who the reporter had gotten that tidbit from, and for everyone listening, it wasn't me.
I haven't read the article, but
Ignorance is no defense.
I don't know anything about it either.
Anyway, on to the next report. Thank you.
Policy Subcommittee report, Ann Chapman.
I'll also make this extremely brief. We met on May 1st to start discussion of the instruction section of the policy manual, which I guess you would consider the most meaty section. We did not get terribly far. We do have some policies for first reading tonight, and we will be meeting again on May 19th to continue reviewing that section. I would like to make a proposal. I'll just throw this out. We've had some comments from people in the public lately that they don't understand the procedures that we use in the board meetings and how we make the decisions. And I guess as chair of the committee, I'd be willing to have our committee take on putting together a little packet including pertinent policies that we can either leave in the back of the room or somehow make available to the public so they understand the process we follow.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like a good idea. Thank you. Town Center Committee, Rosemary.
The Town Center Committee is meeting in the room upstairs, and so I'm missing it. So I won't report on what's happening tonight because I don't know yet. And the community team meeting is the third Wednesday of the month in room 205 of the high school. Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped. I did them both together.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's fine. Unfinished business, school board policy, second reading. Our second reading tonight is on teacher job share policy, an administrative guideline for long-term and short-term substitute professional staff development. Any comments on the teacher job share policies? Charlie?
Just a correction, that's staff employment, not development. You
Where
said
is that?
development.
In the second one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you. Any other comments on these? Okay. Do I hear a motion to accept these as school board policies?
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Okay, thank you. Okay. Discussion and action on the revised teacher evaluation plan.
In your packet, you had, with very really very minor changes to the document you saw, I think, back in either January or February. We have also had 3 meetings held in the buildings for staff comments, so we're ready now to, if you are so inclined, to accept this. This is the result of the work of going from a separate evaluation system for Career Ladder and a separate evaluation system for index teachers to going to one evaluation system for the for all staff, all teaching staff. And as I've explained to people at the meetings as they came, it is a board responsibility to adopt actual evaluation instruments. So your adoption of this instrument then makes it the official instrument that we will be guided by in our evaluations next year.
Okay. Any discussion from the board? Do I hear a motion to accept the revised teacher evaluation plan? Second? Further discussion? All in favor? Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item, approval of the 1992-1993 school calendar.
In your packet, I put in a revised revision. I've lost count of how many times we have, this always happens, of course. What the process with the calendar is similar to, but somewhat less lengthy. The process for teacher evaluation plan does require discussion with staff, with Teachers Association representation, and what changes are on this calendar from the one that you saw last month, taking into consideration comments that came from you last month as well as other discussions. We are proposing to bring staff in on the 3rd of September, which is the Thursday before Labor Day, and bring children in, or students in, on the 8th, that's Tuesday following Labor Day. The really overriding issue there, no matter how one feels about starting school before Labor Day and how much one would like to end a little sooner in June, for us this year in particular was the fact we had a lot of moving, and we have the renovation project at the high school, and frankly we have to go to the planning board, although we're moving along with our plans and so on. We don't know if we're going to planning board in May. We may have to go back in the 19th, and there are certain logistics that we are pushing as quickly as we can, but there are some issues that may delay us somewhat. So I thought that was at least a little cushion. And in fact, the reality is, no matter when you start the year, you have 180 days, 5 staff development days and 175 teacher pupil days. After due consideration and discussion, particularly with the math program, where we are implementing Chicago materials, which we've been implementing in the middle school and the high school level, we are using some newly developed materials at the primary grades next year, and I'm told that we will need 7 opportunities spaced throughout the year for the necessary staff development. So we did add 3 more released afternoons. There's a total of 6. That is a reduction from what we have had. The other issue, and this is one that would have to go to negotiations, but I am also recommending that both the board and the association consider the possibility of adding another staff day. That is, making a calendar of 181 days, 6 staff days, and 175 for pupils. I think we're all in favor of extending our school year. Clearly, this is a very tight budget year, and but I did have some money, as I pointed out, in the budget process to try to provide some kind of staff development time, and that is a piece that could be devoted to that. So I make that recommendation, even though it would have to be added to this calendar, either inserted at some point during the year or added at the end of the school year. This calendar also notes the last day of school as June 24th, which probably makes some people feel panicky, but that is including 5 snow days. So that we've decided that psychologically it's better to tell people that school's going to the 24th and we give you days back than it is to tell you it's going to end on the 18th and add days. Who knows? Maybe we won't have to use any. Furthermore, we also have listed graduation as the 18th because we can allow graduation to occur before the end of underclassmen last days in school, but we have to do it within a week. So given that situation, we think it's prudent to list it on the 18th. I think the other issues that are different, we did add 2 pupil days in December. We had originally listed 2 full weeks at Christmas, the winter holiday break, and because we were starting after Labor Day with pupils, we added Monday and Tuesday. I think those are the principal differences from what you saw last month.
Comments? Connie, one of the things that we might not have considered with the having school on the 21st and the 22nd that I uncovered was that a lot of the deadlines for our applications for colleges are due January 1st. And so I know that there are several people in the high school that appreciate having school those 2 days. It gives the students 2 extra days to get their letter of recommendation and things of that nature. Given the possibility that if we use 5 snow days, school could end on the 23rd of June, could we discuss or consider more of the 2-hour late starts that is a current school board policy that we don't seem to use very often, or is that out of your control?
Oh, it's not out of my control.
I knew that.
The issue is, I personally have tried them in the past in various, in my previous life, and found that there are a lot of glitches. But it can be done. I mean, if people really want to do it, what we have to do is make sure we have a lot of parent understanding of what that means. What I have found, unfortunately, is that there are times when you try a delay and you still can't make it, and you leave kids stranded waiting for the bus. I had that happen to me, and it dampened my enthusiasm for 2-hour delays. Frankly, there are many mornings when I just want to pull the covers up and not hear the phone. But if you wonder how snow days are called out, I rely on our road crew, and they're very good about calling me and telling me by 4:30 in the morning what the situation is, and safety is safety. I frankly believe that they're the ones that are out there. If they tell me it's not a wise idea to get kids out, as far as I'm concerned, no matter how you look at it, it's 180 days, wherever they are.
I love this calendar.
No, I think it's great.
Why is the 17th of June starred? Is that just a misprint? Does that make 6 starred?
Oh, yeah, I think that's, what happened was, let me think. I think originally we lost a day somewhere, and the actual last day, if we don't have to use any snow days, would be, wait a minute, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, would be the 17th. Maybe there's a better way of...
That's right, it just wasn't that little star in the next real calendar will not be.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Ian? A couple questions, and I still think November is a really terrible month, and I wish we could make some progress on that. I was wondering about the 12th and 13th, though. Those are 2 full days of workshops?
Those are parent
that used to be, well, the 12th, that first day this year was an early release day, and then the Friday was a full day.
What those are both parent conference days, but also in our discussion we realized that there's certainly opportunity for staff workshop days. In other words, they're counting on those for multiple uses, actually.
Then I don't see why we need an early release day at the end of that month if we have 2 full days. I know at Pond Cove before it was, basically 1 full day of conferences. I just don't understand why we need that if we now have 2 full days of workshops at the beginning.
They aren't workshops; they're parent conferences, and but we were hoping to get some workshop time in there. That's correct.
We had a half day of school on the Thursday, and now we don't.
Well, obviously, if you look at Wednesday is a holiday, we have no control over that. I mean,
I know, but I still don't understand. We've lost another half half day of school in the month of November. Because that's always been an early release day, and we've had the early release day right before Thanksgiving. And now we have 2.5 days instead of 2 half days and 1 day.
Well, the discussion on making those 2 full days is one that seems to be the choice of the buildings. I guess I'd ask one of the building principals to illuminate that. I mean, was your thinking that the bringing kids in after a holiday for half day and so on with it, that seemed like a somewhat difficult issue?
A lot of people might not come, or our attendance would be as strong. And two, I know for the middle school, we can really use the time for the family conferences. 1.5 days is not enough time to do the conferences that we'd like to do. We're also looking at, if we get them scheduled and we have some time to do a workshop, that we would put that in. So for us, the 2 days were something that we really felt we could use for family conferences.
I mean, to be honest, there are 5 staff days here which are provided for by the state calendar. They require us to have 175 plus 5 staff days. Again, it's a matter of placement, not so much the days themselves. And it was a choice to put them together there rather than to put them somewhere else. They've been spread out more during the year in the past. I hear your point, but that is the...
I just, I'd like to just see us continue to work on this issue of how we get staff development time, and whether there aren't better ways than cutting up all these weeks, and November is just, is continually a problem.
Now, as I'm thinking it over, more thoughts come to my mind. November is a difficult month. It always is a chopped up month. We really did feel, I think, especially from the elementary school and the middle school, that we could use the 2 full days for conferences, that we would do that. The 25th is there. That has been something that has worked very well for us, and in fact, our attendance has slightly improved on that day for families who travel for the Thanksgiving holiday, because by getting out at 11:20, they feel that they come for the half day and then they are on their way for holiday travel. So it has improved slightly. I don't want to say it's improved tremendously. It has improved slightly. That half day of a workshop has been a really good time for us to use as a time to really get started on the budget process, and to do that, and a time to meet as a whole school, talk about some of the directions we want the budget to take, that as we're going to work in our individual grade levels and teams, that we look at issues that are ahead of us, decisions we need to make, and that has been a very important time for us to work for the last 2 years, and seem to work at a good time right at that time of year. So that's why we were in favor of the 25th as an early release day.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. My question is to the superintendent, are all 3 schools on the schedule?
Yeah. Which schedule are you talking about? I mean,
The
released,
latest draft? No, just the whole schedule. I know that the high school didn't use the workshop days in April this year, that the other schools did. They were in session.
I think, didn't you just transfer those? Frank, help me out on that one.
Yeah, no, we have a workshop day coming up at the end of next week. That's something we've done for a couple of years. We've moved we have not held parent conferences in April, but moved that day to the end of May. And that's what we did this year, so that we, in fact, are running our arena scheduling day, which we've done for a number of years, on the day before the prom. And then we have a workshop day the day after the prom. And this is the last year. The prom is going to be during the week. That occurred a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. They moved it. We're moving it back to the weekend, which is where we think it belongs. But I think that what the high school plans to use these workshop days as well, so that the answer is yes, we want to be in the same calendar. And we do plan to have parent conferences then, and we will use the April day for a workshop day. And I want to just second Nancy's comment that and also agree with Ann, that November is always chopped up, and what we keep facing is three chopped up weeks in November. With Veterans Day, and then parent conferences, and then Thanksgiving. And our thought was to try and concentrate that and have 2. And maybe that's worse, I don't know. But it's always with us. Yeah.
Is Arena Day back to when it was?
Arena Day will be held on the day of the prom. We will be dismissing students at the half day. We have found in the past that many students dismiss themselves with their parents' permission, so we have tried to fit with, talk about listening to the customers. We've tried to make use of that day in a constructive way, but we will be dismissing, seniors will leave at 11. We will serve lunch. Juniors will start to be scheduled right at 11. They will probably be done about 12. Sophomores will probably be done about 1, and the freshmen about 2 o'clock. And but we will also feed them, so they will be there scheduling themselves.
Okay. Has anybody checked for sure about whether we have to provide lunch on the early release days?
Yes, we have been checking on that. Actually, the best word we can get is that you're supposed to do at least a bag lunch. I'm not sure that anybody's going to close us down if we don't, but at the same time, I know that that's a regulation.
I think in the K-8 program they have.
Yeah.
High schools.
High school they could do, you're right, but that's because that's a strictly a la carte. Right.
Or you state subsidized.
Yep. I mean, we could perhaps, one of the things I did talk to staff about was changing the time slightly. I think we were talking about, oh, I forget. Anyway, trying to push it back a little bit, but we have been checking on that, and that's what we're being told.
Okay. Other comments? Okay, do I hear a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I just wanted to add some explanation as far as Pond Cove is concerned about those, the 2 workshop days. In addition to the parent conferences, we're hoping also to, because we're beginning the University of Chicago math program, to spend some time informally, perhaps, depending upon when the scheduling of the parent conferences occurs on those 2 days as well. And also, as Nancy mentioned, that is a time to look at budget and that sort of thing, is looking forward.
Yeah. I just think if we're implementing a certain program in a particular school that I mean, this program is laudable and we need the training, but I'm not sure that implementing one program should drive the entire year's schedule. So I think we need to continue to look at the staff development and when it takes place, and maybe some of it should be done, before school actually starts. I'm just, concerned about how many cut-up weeks there are of instruction for the kids, because you're starting up again and again. Well, this is a reduction over last year. And it was obvious in my conversation with teachers that this was a high priority, and that was a high priority really pretty much across the board. I mean, high school teachers tend to be less missionary about it. Middle school, some yes, some no, but for the elementary, I got enough feedback to convince me that this was a pretty good compromise.
Yes. Sure. Yeah. Please.
I come not to have you make a change, but just to hear me out. My name is Sue McMullen, and I wear 2 hats, one of a parent and also as a children's camp director. I have a large concern, obviously, because I feel that the summer experience for children is real important. And I feel that we're receiving children in our country who are academically pretty worn out by the time we see them, and that the school year is really dragged out. And I guess I could say from a parent's standpoint that our kids are really ready to have a break. For future calendar sets, I'm just wondering if it would be appropriate to, here we go with committees and getting more people having input, but including some of us perhaps who might have some ideas or some brainstorms on how we could make it just as significant for children in the schools and be able to let them have that summer experience and family experience, because we don't want to drag our summer community through time when kids need to have family time as well. So I have a concern, along with probably camp directors all over the country, that the extended school year is going to perhaps intrude upon an experience that we feel is very valuable.
I think one of the most interesting trends that you're probably aware of, but we mentioned it here earlier this year, the national trend to look at the 2 months of school and 3 to 4 weeks of break. And I have absolutely no idea what that would do to the camp situation, except that I would assume that would impact quite a lot. But it is a growing trend, and one of the reasons it's a growing trend is because it appears from the people who are trying it. I know Sue and I were at a conference where we were talking to some people from Texas. I forget what city it was now, but anyway, they've been doing this in the elementary. It was really interesting to hear it from the standpoint of people actually doing it, not just as a theoretical thing. They felt that neither they nor the kids ever got as stretched out and tired as happens now. And that also for a nation looking at extending, by and large, the 180-day school year, looking at the national, international issues here, that it's going to be a lot easier to add a few days in that kind of a setup. Now, that's a massive change, talk about change, because at the secondary level, we compete in schedules, all these districts around here, I don't know exactly, but 17 districts send to Portland Vocational School. Can you imagine getting 17 districts to agree? Or to say nothing of all the interscholastic, which are not the same 17. So how that change might occur, I mean, I'm not saying it because I think it's going to happen tomorrow, but I personally think you're going to hear a lot more about that. And it would be interesting to hear from people like yourself with that perspective. I assure you we will ask you more about it.
Other comments? Do I hear a motion to approve the 1992-1993 school calendar?
So moved.
Second? Rosemary, further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Okay.
Is that a 6-1?
Did you vote?
Yeah, that was 6-1.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, the next item, elimination of such teaching positions as are required by the adopted budget.
Okay, this is something that is a legal necessity for those people who I have explained to the board in their minutes, but just for public input. Every year we go through a budget process, and during the budget process, decisions are made. That is, positions may be added or eliminated. And at some point, when the budget becomes final, our budget becomes final when the town council adopts the town budget. So last night, the council adopted the budget. It is now legally recommended for me to ask the board to pass a motion, and I will read it so that I get the language right here, to move that the school board eliminate the positions of, and I'll list those for you, as a result of changes in local conditions, namely severe budgetary restrictions. I'm not sure that, some people might argue that it isn't severe, but it's severe enough to have led us to those decisions. And the positions, of course, are the integrated arts dance movement part-time position, the grade 5 classroom teacher, the .6 middle school life skills position, and the full-time grades 4 and 5 gifted and talented position. Once you've taken that vote, I will then ask somebody to vote to reinstate a half-time grades 4 and 5 gifted and talented position, which was a budgetary decision you made. Legally, it is recommended that you eliminate one position and then reinstate a half, rather than just to indicate that that's a reduction in the position. Do you want me to read that again?
I just had a question. Did we reduce a grade 5 or a grade 4?
It was grade 5.
I see. Thank you.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second? Second. Further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. New business, personnel requests.
Don't we have to?
Reinstate.
We have to reinstate.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Somebody has to
sorry.
move to reinstate them.
I'll move that we reinstate, was it half a position?
Half, 4 grade 4, 5 G&T.
Right.
Thank
So
you.
moved.
Second. Further discussion?
I just need clarification in your notes. It says reinstate a .4 gifted and talented position, then you're talking about a .2 gifted and talented in the...
At the middle school. I feel comfortable with you calling it a half-time position. We are still not absolutely certain Whether that will be the .4 or the .6, we're still trying to pin down the middle school piece, but at the halftime, I am then able to go ahead and fill that position and tell you exactly what we need at that point.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. New business, personnel requests. New teaching assignment for the 1992-1993 school year.
Okay. We had a resignation, if you may recall, from our business education teacher, Jerry Seo, and after going through discussion interview process, I'm recommending to you that we appoint the teacher who has been filling his position for the last 2 years. That's Elizabeth Nilsson. Just to give you a little summary, she has an MBA from the University of Southern Maine. She has a bachelor in business administration. Her experience includes being an assistant professor in the Division of Business at Westbrook College, as well as a full-time instructor there. She has also worked in a variety of secretarial and business-related positions. She has worked for us very satisfactorily in that position. She has indicated a desire to stay with us, and after the high school went through its interview process, they're recommending to me and I to you that we appoint her. I do want to point out that since she has spent 2 years with us, even though it has been on a half-time position, the half-time position, or greater than half-time, qualifies for a full year experience, and in fact does qualify her for being placed on continuing contract. But we have evaluated her performance, and we are comfortable with making that recommendation to you, since she has already been with us 2 years in that. I just wanted to make that perfectly clear, that this is somebody who's already been through the probationary period with us.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to accept Elizabeth Nilsson in the business teaching assignment for the 1992-93 school year? Second? Further discussion? All in favor? Okay. And the retirement?
We have, I have received 2 letters of retirement from teachers who have decided to take your offer of early retirement. One is from Peter Holbrook, and the other one is from Darlene Ayers. Peter Holbrook has been with us for 25 years, and Darlene, I think, for 18 or 19. Wait a second. Both of them long-term teachers, a nurse educator and nurse in the district. I certainly, some of us were at the retirement party the other night for the teachers, and Peter was there. We had a chance to get to know him a little better than perhaps you would have anyway. Certainly appreciate all their years of service. In addition, I have a letter of resignation from Peter Horton, who has not been with us that long. He's been with us 6 years. He has been a part-time English teacher at the high school. This year was also working part-time at the middle school in social studies. He has accepted a full-time position at Waynflete, so he will be leaving us. So those 3 resignations.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to accept the resignations of Peter Holbrook, Darlene Ayers, and Peter Horton?
I so move.
Second? Further discussion? All in favor? Okay. And a request to reduce the teaching assignment.
Yes, in your packet, I believe we included a letter from Barbara Cannell, who is on staff as a foreign language teacher. Currently, she has been teaching. You didn't have that in your packet? No. Well, all right, then I need to spend more time on it with you. Barbara has been a full-time teacher with us, working both at the middle school and at the high school. And what her request to us is that she would like to work only at the high school. At the present time, there is approximately, for her assignment, would be about a half-time assignment, 6/10 of the assignment. We've all discussed that with her, and last week she sent me a letter, and maybe it came in after it was dated before that. I thought it was okay. If this is the first you've heard of that, you may want to ask some questions and go ahead. I mean, this is by her request. It would require us we will have to expand one of our we aren't ready to make an absolute recommendation to you at the present time, but we see a possibility of expanding one of our current part-time middle school instructors so that we don't anticipate this being a real problem for us. At the same time, Barbara is feeling very stretched. She's been very much a lead person in establishing the FLES program. She has also, of course, returned to the high school, is committed to staying at the high school, and she is feeling that having to travel between the two buildings and the two programs, on top of all the work she's put into establishment and so on, is leaving her pretty stretched, and she would like what this amounts to is a request for a one-year reduction in assignment on her part.
Questions from the board?
I'd make a comment. I think that she's done a terrific job, and I don't often comment about my own children, but I'm glad that my son is on his way to the high school, and we'll be following her if that's where she goes, and she and her colleagues in her program have instilled enough enthusiasm in him that he's, as a matter of fact, going to Mexico with Sue McMullen's summer camp. I think it's your first year, isn't it, sending a group there? So, on a personal note, I think it's a loss to the middle school that she won't be there, but I wish her well.
Well, I think this is one of those requests where you have an excellent teacher and it is in the nature of a one-year request, but I think that it is sometimes really one of the things we can do to support our staff is to hear their requests when they feel like maybe it's a year when they need a little less stretching.
Rosemary.
I was just wondering, is there any leeway if we approve the reduction to a 0.6 if she does take on additional work at the high school over time?
You can always, this is really her request.
Okay.
And if for any reason in finishing up the schedule and so on, my understanding, my conversation, and correct me if you have a different understanding, Frank, but that she would be willing to teach more than the 0.6, but she does not want to be in two buildings.
Okay.
That's correct. She's really saying she is not able, she feels, to teach both sets of students well. She can't be in two places at once after school or before school, and she wants to focus on high school. And I anticipate that a year from this September, with the influx of students in Spanish, that we will probably in next year's budget be asking for an increase in Spanish staff at the high school. And I think I hope that's somewhat inevitable. I know that any budget requests are not inevitable, but I'm just saying, I think also sees that, and she's just saying I can't do both.
Charlie?
I would agree with Peter. I think it's a great loss to the FLES program, but I see her as a continuing role in the high school of greeting the kids that have been through her program, of coming finally to her and carrying them through, and I think she'll be strongly utilized there and have an impact on the Spanish program in the high school.
Other comments? Do I hear a motion then to accept the one-year request of Barbara Cannell to reduce her teaching assignment?
So moved.
Second? Further discussion? All in favor? Okay, thank you. The last item are school board policies, the first reading. Curriculum development and adoption. Equivalent instruction. And post-secondary enrollment options. Any comments or questions? Rosemary?
Yes. I have a question on the equivalent instruction, and it's just a clarification. The first paragraph says, any student may be excused from attending the Cape Elizabeth schools provided the student obtains equivalent instruction in a private school. It goes on to say, or in some other manner approved by the school board subject to the approval of the Commissioner of Education. My concern is students can go to another public school with the approval of the superintendent.
Well, not really. There's a provision in the law that talks about some circumstances where there can be mutual agreement between two superintendents for the release of subsidy, waiver of subsidy and so on, which simply means we get to count the student, which is certainly a right that, or at least an option that does get exercised occasionally, but that's subject to a lot of disclaimers. I think the intent of this is intended, that we have compulsory education laws in this state, as well as I think all but one state in the Union. And this was simply, my understanding of this was just, it goes back to '84. This has to do with more the homeschooling issue. And as I'm sitting here looking at that, I'm kind of wondering about that wording, because originally the school board had to approve homeschooling requests, and now we're out of it totally, except for the fact that anybody who desires to submit a homeschooling plan to the state has to submit it both to the state and to us, but we are not asked to approve it. So I'm going to have to, when we meet again, I'm going to have to rethink whether that wording is exactly right. I think all that is intended to do is a statement to cover the homeschooling issue. I don't think really, there are court cases that have long since given everybody the right to attend a private school. I don't even know why that's in there, to be perfectly honest. And I think it is really only dealing with the homeschooling situation, and so maybe I need to check on the wording a little bit.
So essentially, that's replacing the equivalent instruction, which is our current policy.
That's right. It's see, that's what, right. Yeah, exactly. You got it.
Other questions or comments?
I have a question on the curriculum development adoption. The note, is that part of the policy? Or is
No,
we X'd that out?
Yeah, that's just informational.
You had X'd out other things that you didn't want.
Yes. We neglected to do that. We'll do that next time.
Other questions or comments? Okay, this is the first reading of these, so they'll come back at the next board meeting to be voted on. And now I need a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of discussing the superintendent's evaluation and ongoing negotiations with contractors.
Before we do that, I need to clarify my vote on the gifted talented. I'm not against putting it back. I just felt it should have been the .6. I'm concerned about the .2.
We'll probably ask you for the .6,
That
but
was
I'm
my
not
point.
absolutely certain.
Okay. Do I hear that? Is there a motion to enter executive session? Okay. Second? Further discussion? All in favor? Okay, thank you. The meeting is adjourned.